So good afternoon to everyone. I'm sure we will have more joining. I do want to give a shout out to the Martin Luther King Day commemoration that is going on, sponsored by SMPH at the same time with a great panel discussion. But this is also germane to our combined work to enhance equity in healthcare delivery. So I'm Dr. Jane Mahoney, Director of the Dissemination Implementation Launchpad at UW-Madison's Institute for Clinical and Translational Research. And this is the Dissemination Research and Implementation Science Seminar, which is a monthly lunchtime seminar to learn about the growing science of D&I research and practice. The seminar is open to all, and it's part of the Implementation Science and Community Health Outcomes Certificate, as well as being generally available to everyone. So I'd like to introduce our two speakers who will be with us today, hosting a great discussion. So I will introduce both of you, Dr. Mike Kinnigs and Erin Hicks, and then give a few words about the format for the seminar today. So Dr. Mike, how do you pronounce your last name, Mike?
Paintings, you got it.
Phoenix. Professor of Psychiatry at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The goal of Dr. Koenig's research is to improve mental health care and promote resilience for individuals who are currently or formerly incarcerated. He has a long-standing collaboration with the state of Wisconsin Department of Corrections that allows him to work with people currently incarcerated in state prisons. He also works with formerly incarcerated people in our community. His research approach includes stakeholder engagement, clinical trials, and basic science studies on psychological and neurobiological functions relevant for emotion and decision-making. Erin Hicks started working with Jerome Dillard and Voices Beyond Bars upon his return from incarceration back into the community, which brought the very work that he was doing while incarcerated now into the community. This was also his introduction to Nehemiah and meeting Pastor Alex G., who had started his own men's group called Man Up. Erin then moved into a reentry specialist role at Nehemiah, where he now facilitates the Man Up group with his amazing ability to connect with people and help them work through their hurts and pains. So at this time, I'll turn the time over to our presenters. This month, our presenters will be using a discussion-based format. So in a minute, we will be changing your permissions so the meeting will run more like a Zoom meeting. We request that you turn your cameras on to fully participate. If you have a question or comment, please use the raise hand feature and wait to unmute until our panelists call on you. And then you're also welcome to use the chat feature. So I look forward to our presentation today, and we'll turn it over to you, Mike and Erin.
Thanks, Dr. Mahoney. Really great to be with you all. Appreciate you making the time on this snow day. One programming note, I'm cooped up with 3 small kids today, so if you hear any screaming or yelling and banging, do not be alarmed. That's just run-of-the-mill activity on a snow day around here. So right off the top, I want to highlight the title of our talk. So I don't have it right in front of me, but I know it starts with the phrase "best of both worlds" and refers to our community academic partnership. And that phrase, "best of both worlds," is one that my friend and partner and colleague Erin came up with early on in our collaboration to describe how he saw the work developing. And so maybe off the top, I just want to invite Erin to say a little bit about what he perceives in our collaboration and why that term "best of both worlds" applies in his mind.
Definitely. No, I appreciate it. And thank you guys for having me on here as well. Um, that derived from, I understand that a lot of times when people get knowledge about a specific area in life, uh, it's only, you only understand it through one lens. Um, and that's through whoever that person is, be it doctor or whoever is the educator behind that. But with that being said, I thought that the work that we're doing, you get the expertise of lived experience and the academic world, which is a contrast almost. You normally get just the academic side, or you just get the lived experience side. And I thought being able to have both makes learning and education much more richer. It gives you a greater lens, and ultimately, it creates an atmosphere where you get the best of both worlds.
And so we're happy to talk about how that has transpired in our collaboration, the lessons we've learned from each other, the specific projects that we're working on, how those came to be and where those are going. Really whatever you all are interested in hearing about, that's what we want to discuss. I thought I could start by just talking a little bit about my path as an academic researcher and how I came into this space. So I was trained as a neuroscientist, really, basic science researcher. Never fathomed I would be doing anything like this, frankly. Um, at one point in my career, I had the opportunity, to make a long story short, so I was a cognitive neuroscientist working on, neural mechanisms related to emotion and decision making. Was invited into a collaboration where we had the opportunity to collect brain imaging data in Wisconsin state prisons through a mobile MRI unit. And to me, that was a fascinating, opportunity scientifically. And it was the first time I had ever set foot in a prison. And just immediately I was impacted by, what I saw there. Just plain as day, you could see the suffering that was happening, in that place. And of course, our data bore that out. We saw elevated rates of virtually any kind of mental illness that we measured for: depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, issues with substance use and alcohol. And while the work that we were doing was successful by conventional academic metrics in terms of we were getting papers, we were getting grants, I just couldn't help but wonder, like, is this really the best use of this opportunity, of this research infrastructure? And I, with a bit of reflection, I came to believe that it was not. That the work was really benefiting myself. It was benefiting my lab. It was good for my career. I got tenure. We had, had these grants and all of this. But at the end of the day, I couldn't honestly point to how this work was going to directly impact, the people that were participating in it. And so through some connections that I had, well, I guess let me back up. So what we started to do is shift the lab direction toward intervention research. And this is not work I had really done, but through collaboration, we managed to get an NIH grant to mount what has been the first study of an evidence-based PTSD treatment in a prison setting. So we're proud to have done that. But again, I approach that from, I think, what I call the typical academic mindset, which is, look in the literature, see what treatments are out there and try to match those to the deficits or disorders that we have documented in this setting. And so while it was more directly aimed at benefiting the population, it was still done really without the input of that population. And it wasn't until we sent in a grant application. This is work I've been doing with a collaborator of ours, Dan Groupie, who's at the Center of Healthy Minds, that some of you may know. We sent in another grant application to NIH, and one of the reviewers, thankfully, really drilled us on our perspective as it relates to implementation and dissemination. And these were terms I had heard. This was about 4-ish years ago. Terms I had heard, but I did not appreciate the depth of the science, on that topic. And Dan and I were, we kind of regrouped. We're like, well, what is this reviewer getting at? And like, what would this mean for us? And so that was kind of our first step, or our first push, I should say, into this work. And everything we learned about it just really resonated with, what we wanted to do. And we were really glad to see that there were, a lot of thought and a lot of work dedicated to how you take an evidence-based treatment and make it work in a setting where it's not currently being applied. And so, I'm very much still believe a novice in terms of implementation and dissemination kinds of research, although, we're trying to quickly build, capacity in that. But our first work was really to start to build relationships and to seek out relationships with people who had been impacted. And that's, how I initially met Aaron. And thinking back to some of those first meetings, it was really just, trying. I want to hear Aaron's perspective on this and how he recalls that. But there was sort of like some feeling each other out, like getting to know each other. And what I really appreciated about it, what has been so valuable, is just the openness that he brought to it. He and some other colleagues from the community who were involved, and their willingness to tell us how academia is perceived, how the university is perceived in the community, what we need to do to be able to work effectively with community. And one of the main lessons I took from those initial meetings was this is really about relationships. And I think one of the phrases that you hear in community engaged work is, we don't, how do they say this? We don't care what you know until we know that you care. And so that really, I think, was apropos in terms of where we were at in getting to know one another and starting to make plans. I think as academics, a lot of times we have an idea for what the study is. We're like, okay, now we just need you to work with us on that. But it was more like, wait. Like, we don't know what the study is. We don't know what the project is. This is what we're going to try to, figure out together. And so maybe I'll ask Aaron to, just by way of background or preface, to kind of share how he came into work, what perspective he had.
Well, everything that Mike has given to you is stellar. With that being said, it wasn't just also getting to understand and to know the research. It was also about knowing the researcher, right? Because it's about a population of people that I come from. So we look at things very differently. Our perspective is very different. And we had that opportunity to be able to share some of our own concerns and our own perspective as far as how we see the UW. And it wasn't through a good lens. It wasn't through a good lens. A lot of times people come in and they do research. They abstract what they want to get out of there, and they're out of there. Like, there's no other connection. There's no anything. And so we didn't want that kind of feel. We wanted this to look more long-term, and we wanted to build camaraderie around all of the aspects of research. And it also put us in a position to ask some of the questions, why? Why do we do research the way we do it? How can you have a subject without a subject matter? How do people talk about homelessness and you don't have any homeless people at the table? So these are all the things we got the opportunity to ask. And I got to share some of my own personal experiences. I also wear another hat. I work for Focus Interruptionists around gun violence. And I was in a meeting there, and they were talking about gun violence. And they were just, doing a lot of talking about it. But in the midst of all of it, I got a chance to ask a question. And my question was strictly, um, by show of hands in here, who wakes up or goes to sleep to gunshots? And no hands went up. But mine's did. And the reason I share that is because a lot of times we do a lot of things without implementing the very people that it's impacting, and getting that perspective, getting that lens. And I think it's super important to grab that because whenever I think that's the only way you can really get sound research, with all parties being involved, being able to abstract information from all parties so that you can have a clear lens of how what's most effective, what can be helpful. A lot of times people may know what's helpful for them, but they may not have the verbiage or the platform to be able to share with individuals. So I just think by bringing this sort of contrast together, I believe this is what research should look like. It should look like abstracting from the community as well as the academic world. And so my own personal experience, I had that opportunity to share what it was like being incarcerated, what it felt like, things that I still deal with even after being out of prison. And it also helps, I'm able to help him, give him a better insight on things that's needed to be able to, help individuals coming home from prison and jail. Most people don't know, but 90 to 95% of people that go to prison and jail will get back out into the community. And if that's the case, then, the budget for incarcerating people is 1.3 billion. The budget for releasing people is at an all-time low. So if we're going to put them in the community, then I think they need to be able to, one, have a voice, but the other part is to be able to get their needs met so that we all can have a safer community.
Yeah.
And so it's been amazing. It's just been an amazing journey. The whole journey has been. I never saw this coming. I never thought that me coming home from prison, working with Mike coming home from Fond du Lac, how we cross paths, but the paths has been it's been amazing. And I believe that he's been able to abstract some research that, I mean, hands down has been so stellar that you couldn't have got it no other way.
Yeah. And I can give, so there's a few things that I can talk about, or that we can discuss. One is like, how do we create the space to get that kind of input?
Right.
So maybe we can take that. One thing I want to say is like how dramatically my perspective on research has changed after talking with Aaron. And I'll just give one example. This came to mind as Aaron was talking. Like, as academics, I think especially in the clinical space, we think a lot about fixing disorders. We think a lot about like addressing deficits, and that, from the discipline where I come from, mental health and psychiatry, right? We document symptoms and we put them together and say, this is your disorder, these are the symptoms, and the treatments are trying to fix that. And that's, a lot how I started when we thought, oh, we want to do intervention work. Well, what are the disorders or deficits that are most applicable? But in talking with Aaron and the people that he brought to the table, that's not how they see themselves. They don't see themselves as walking disorders and collections of symptoms that need to be fixed. We heard a lot about, and I can talk about the mechanism that, we use to collect this information, but to just kind of jump ahead to some of the conclusions we made, we heard a lot about people want growth, they want opportunity, just really understanding that we all want a lot of the same things in life, and that people need ways to overcome the barriers that are in front of them, and the kinds of supports or services that you might look at or feel comfortable with in one walk of life are not going to be the same things in another walk of life. So that was just one kind of really significant shift about just the kinds of services that we would even research, the kinds of things that would comprise an intervention that we would want to study. And then the outcomes that we would measure, right? We're not measuring symptom reductions, right? We're measuring more, positive, aspects of well-being, things like hope and optimism and self-efficacy. And then there are some, more objectives you can think about too. But that was one point I wanted to make. With regard to how we went about figuring out, how are we going to bring people to the table? I just can't emphasize enough how important the relationship and the trust is. We talk about in our group of one phrase that we have used a lot is 1 degree of trust. So Aaron and I spent a lot, and there's no substitute for the time either. I mean, Aaron and I spent a lot of time together, getting to know one another, our pasts, our futures, our desires, our families, personal things to really kind of understand where each other are coming from. And then that allowed, Aaron can speak to this, but I think that allowed him then to approach people and invite them to meet with me and feeling like, okay, I know kind of what this guy is about and could explain that, to the person.
Yeah.
And same with me is like, if I was going to bring in someone on the academic side, like a student or a colleague or something like that. And so we always talked about like that 1 degree of trust and moving at the speed of trust and not any faster than that. And so then our group just, sort of expanded. I think did I see a hand go up? Is that what that?
No, it was just like an applause. Somebody applauded us.
Oh, okay.
The one thing I want to throw in there, as he's sharing, is that I share with him something very personal but very real. I told him that like people power is not an issue on our end, men or women. It didn't matter. We just had to know it was a genuine person. Period. That's all that, and that's what really mattered. You know what I mean? It wasn't so much about the research or anything like that. It just we needed a genuine person to just kind of hear from our lens, get another, be open to another perspective and how to bring both of these worlds together. Because again, I share with Mike, I consider myself as a bridge, because I do to some degree, not fully, but I understand the academic world, but I also understand the world that I came from as well. And so I wanted to be that bridge. And so that's exactly what I became, that bridge to be able to. And I mean, since we've been doing it, we haven't ran out of people. And that's just statewide, literally, all the way from Kenosha to Superior. So
let me put some numbers to that. I know Aaron always gets kicked when we try. But like, so I'll give you an example. Like we've tried in the past, again, this is work that I'm not proud of, but I did it. We tried to do follow-up studies with people who participated in our research while they were incarcerated and then follow up with them in the community. And I bet we reached out to 60 or 70 people, and we maybe got 3 people to call us back and 0 showed up. With Aaron, when we were starting to invite people for our first focus groups, and this, as researchers, those of you who do, research, recruitment is always the limiting step, right? Getting people. So we worked with Aaron, we kind of came up with a plan together, and Aaron kept saying like, don't worry about the people will be there. But like from my experience in research, I'm like, that's always the tricky part. And so we talked about, these focus groups, and he's like, well, how many do you need and when do you need them by? And we're like, well, I don't know, maybe in a few weeks we could get something together. He's like, they'll be there tomorrow. He's like, how many do you need? And literally, I think you had you and one of our colleagues, between you and Deb, had 2 groups of, we over recruited. I think we said we're looking for focus groups of like 10 people, and you had like 15 show up like the next week. And this is just, and I have other examples of this now, even recruiting for intervention and treatment studies. They talk to their networks, they talk to people, and because of the trust and credibility they have in the community, those people show, and they know the trust and credibility, but they know that if Aaron is standing behind it, and Aaron has been involved, and and people that Aaron brought to the table have been involved. They know it's going to be something of value to them. So it's just a night and day experience in trying to, recruit for a study when you are actually have co-developed the project, with community.
And I just want to, something. I mean, I appreciate this again, but I just want to speak to, like, man, all the education that I have learned around just research, and the IRB, and it's just been amazing. Like, it's so, when I came home, I just want to share this little piece. When I came home from prison, I didn't know that criminology existed. I'm being honest with you. I had no clue of that. And that was one of my first classes that I had coming home from prison. And I'm listening to all of these people, and they're talking about my life academically. Blew me away. I couldn't believe it. Um, but it was an eye opener, and everything that I've done, man, around academics just kind of been like really an eye opener to me. Um, and I just know that, man, this relationship, my hope and prayer is that it becomes a model. And I'm just a strong believer that wherever there's a higher learning, wherever there's a college somewhere, it needs to be involved in the community. We shouldn't have colleges and communities if it's not going to help build those communities. So just some things I get a chance to share with him, and my hope is this becomes a for real model, that people really use the community, because you do a disservice. You lose so much by not using the community. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're happy to take questions. I saw like a few comments, people, maybe some of the things we said resonated with some of your all experiences. And so if you have questions, yeah, please let's start a discussion. I can start by saying, kind of going back to how some of our meetings materialized. One thing that was important for us was location, I believe. So again, typical academic mindset, we'd say, what we do have a conference room in our department that we can use. If we do in the evening, why don't we order in Panera? Whatever the standard. I'm not a paid spokesperson for Panera, but you know what I mean? Like whatever the standard, catering thing is. And again, this is where our community partners like, well, hold on, let's, that's not always a welcoming space necessarily. It's not always easy to get to. Is there a place in the community we can use? We ended up using the South Madison partnership, which has been a great setting for us. Just the idea of having a meal together, like, let's not make that an afterthought. Let's not make this so like, oh yeah, this is just something for us to just eat so people aren't hungry, but let's create an opportunity to really, kind of hang out, chat, get to know people. And so we would dedicate the first half hour to the meal, and we started by having some of our community members of our team pick the caterer, which was a great experience for us all, to try food that I guess made people feel welcome and comfortable, and just even bringing in like silverware. One of our community members like wanted the people that we were inviting from her community to feel valued. And, some of us academics were like, well, isn't that what the money's for? You know what I mean? Like, you have a stipend, and I can talk about like the funding for this and what levels I think are appropriate. But if we're bringing people in as experts, right, on par with the expertise that we have as academics, then the compensation should reflect that. But even more than that, it's, people are coming with their expertise, but it's a very personal kind of expertise and a very personal kind of experience. And that was something that our community partners really wanted us as academics to understand. Like, these are these people's lives, and they have suffered for the information that you're going to gain from this. And that has to be respected. And so just really putting thought into like, what that what that setting is, and to make sure you have, that input on, how it's going to be received, and to make it, something that's comfortable. And I can tell you, I mean, everybody I can speak for in our community advisory board now really looks forward just to getting together. I mean, you can see it when people show up. We have, and again, not to brag this up, but like, we have a community advisory board that's been meeting now for over a year, and we have perfect attendance, including one guy who moved to Iowa during the course of our meetings, and he drives from Iowa. Wow. Just to come from where is he at? Cedar Rapids area, North Liberty, just outside Iowa City. He drives 3 hours to come. We say, like, you don't have to do that, but he gets so much out of it and feels so invested in what we're doing. We have other people who drive over an hour to get there. It's really a cool thing. I mean, I've again, going back to how I started in science, never thought I'd be part of anything like that. And when people come with that level of investment and buy-in, I mean, you better believe you're going to get really rich information. That they're bringing a lot to the table. Aaron, do you have any thoughts on, like, just what, I guess, thinking back?
No, I had a whole different thought. And my thought is, we got about 30 minutes left, and I haven't heard any questions. I need to hear something.
Yeah, there's one question in chat about any suggestions about how grant budgets can be leveraged to support community organizations, community partners.
Yeah, you absolutely have to do it. There is sort of like a catch-22 here, where I feel like to write a good grant with this, you need input of the community, but how do you input of the community without that funding? In our case, we were successful in getting one of the SPUR grants from ICTR, Stakeholder Patient Engaged Research, and that was instrumental. And I think ICTR, to their credit, really gets this. Like, you need some money with some flexibility to be able to bring, people to the table. And so we had a SPUR grant. Then we were able to get a grant from an engagement award from PCORI, Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. And again, I think they really get this too. And I'm happy to chat, offline with folks about those funding opportunities and mechanisms. Yeah, so it is important to budget. I think it's important to understand, what a respectable rate of pay would be. We pay somewhere, I think, around like $75 an hour for people to participate in our meetings. So, we're not, this is a rate above, I wouldn't think of, especially if you're talking about an advisory board, these are not just research participants. You know what I mean? Where they're coming in to fill out surveys. These are people who are bringing a different level of engagement and expertise. And I think your budget has to reflect that. So the payments to individuals, and then to work out with those individuals how they want to be paid. Like, our participants strongly preferred cash payments, which is extra work on our part, but it is doable. So to make that effort, to understand those preferences and try to honor those if you can. Food is important. I think if you to build community, to make it workable for people, especially if they have other jobs. If there's an organization that's instrumental in the collaboration, like, so in our case, Nehemiah plays a role. Thinking about a subaward to them, like, are there going to be like administrative duties that they take on? Are they going to administer payments, for example? Would the group that you're working with rather work with their community organization directly for things like payments rather than the university? And I can tell you this, I love this university. We are not well set up to handle ongoing community engagement in terms of like payment and support. It's such a headache. And even getting those people on our research teams is difficult. Aaron's been phenomenal. The people that we work with have been phenomenal in putting up with us, I would say, and the delays and the difficulties. But that's something I hope we can streamline. So yeah, as it gets to like, working with the community organization, do they have an F&A rate? Is there someone there where you can cover part of their salary to make sure that they have time available and you're not just, asking for favors without compensation, asking for time and effort without compensation?
Mike, there is a related question on paying. We know food is so important. And how have you budgeted for food? It's because it's often not an allowable item in a grant. And so how do you manage that?
I guess we've never had that bounce back at us as not allowable.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, we've always like put it in as an item, just use the UW, whatever limit per person and just budget it that way.
That's great to know. I do have a question on, I was so impressed that the level of sort of collaboration really extends to co-creation at all aspects. The study, the outcomes, the whatever intervention. And I'm wondering if you feel that had caused any pushback from reviewers that felt that it was sort of, how do reviewers see that strong extent of co-creation, which to me, it seems great, but were there any negatives to that?
We haven't encountered that. I think it's important to be thoughtful about where you're applying to and making sure that the organization, the funder gets it. And those that get it, and I think everyone knows what I mean when I say that, but like they understand the value of community engagement input. They understand the effort that it takes to do it well. There are, and I don't know, like there are some organizations that are really, really aware of that as an organization, like PCORI. Within NIH, I found that there are pockets where they are and pockets where they aren't, of course. So I think just, making sure that the funder who you're applying to, that it's a good match. But so far I have not. I think the more of that you have, and by that I mean the more community engagement, the more intimately involved community members are in terms of crafting the proposal, the better. We really haven't seen the limit to that where they're like, well, that's too much of that, too much, community input. That's always been cited as a strength. And I'll say too, just to kind of put some numbers to this stuff, in my career, like the prior part of my career, I'm a tenured faculty member at UW. Like I've been pretty successful in getting grants, but I would maybe get one out of every 6 or 7 I would apply for, somewhere around there, maybe 1 out of 10 in lean times. And since we've done this, we've gotten every grant we've applied for so far. And a lot of them have been pilot grants. And like I said, I think we have aimed judiciously and finding the right funders who are interested in this kind of thing. But I attribute it entirely to the fact that it's very clear that the ideas that we're coming up with are not the traditional, kind of academic deficit, let us solve your problems approach. They're really around empowering community, and there's always letters that from the community members that speak to the genesis of the project and how it addresses needs in their community, and that we have found really resonates with reviewers.
And I would just add to that, I'm kind of like his personal rabbit's foot. So every grant if he lets me hear it, I tell him right, we're gonna get it. Go ahead and every single one that I've told him, he got it. So kind of like the Packers too. Every Packer game I go to, we win. So
So question, Ann?
Yeah, thank you. This is really wonderful to hear, helpful to hear a lot about. What's interesting to me is that, so far the conversation is focused a lot on some of the obstacles that researchers encounter in trying to get grants and trying to get the academic environment to trust in some ways in some different approaches. And I'm curious about going back to how do you initiate trust? How do you build that trusting relationship? At some point, Aaron, you recognize something in Mike that really helped nurture that relationship. And I honestly find myself wondering, even just listening to the language we use when describing the academic experience and obstacles here, how do you, that's a heck of a long bridge to build. So I'd just love to hear a little bit more about that.
yeah, I have a motto. My motto is fair exchange is not a robbery. So when it's no different if you have a friend somewhere who you just talk to, and maybe you don't talk to them in the academic language, but it's really just being okay with sharing a piece of you because we are sharing a piece of us, right? And so as long as you keep that model, keep it simple. If you've had a struggle, be okay with sharing that because I see your success. I see that you're at the UW. I see all of these different things, but me personally, I would want to know more about Ann, like where you come from and what makes you do what you do, you know. So being open to also allowing yourself to be vulnerable is super huge. And a word that I'm going to throw out there, transparency. As long as you can be transparent with people, one thing about being incarcerated, and you may not see the humor in this, but it is some in there. Part of being incarcerated, you get a chance to hear bullshit from all across the state. So when you come in contact with people, everyone has a bullshit meter, right? And so when you recognize it, you shut down or you give them what they're looking for and you keep it moving. But when you also have in the cartoon, Spider-Man would have his spidey senses, and those senses would tell him whether he was in danger or whether he was okay. And so part of building that trust with people is allowing yourself to utilize that skill set. Is it okay for me to be vulnerable, and vice versa? But it's about a give and take. And again, you got to realize you're dealing. This for you. It may be an academic endeavor. For the person on the other side, that's their life. So, just keeping those things in consideration in whatever aspect you are trying to abstract information.
And I'll just elaborate on that, Ann, too, a little bit. I think as academics, yeah. A lot of times academics, we sort of wear our CV like as our like outward identity. Like, here's who I am, and this is why I should be listened to and respected, and just try to be really impressive that way. And one thing that's remarkable about Aaron Aaron leads peer support groups, and he leads people through really difficult issues. And how he does that is like what he was talking about, like opening up with vulnerability. Like if you expect somebody else to be vulnerable, you have to kind of model that for them, show that for them. And that was really, as far as our relationship was, just a huge part of it. We would spend time. We took walks through the Arboretum, 2 hours sometimes, 3 hours, and just talked about our lives. And like when I would see Aaron, the things he was like willing to share about himself, I made me do a lot of reflection. And I don't want to really get into it, but I've told Aaron things about things that have happened to me that I have told 0 other people in the entire world. And it's because he has cultivated this ability in himself and in others to do that. And so there's no line on your CV that will impress people to the point where that they'll just kind of give up that need to know you at a more personal level.
That's super, super helpful to hear. Thank you.
There's another question in chat for you, Aaron. Thanks so much for sharing your experiences with us. I'm wondering, what do you tell other community members when they ask what's in it for them to participate in research?
Great question. I don't always tell them what's in it for them. I just tell them that they're being connected to a great person who's not going to do you any harm. And, here's an opportunity to build a relationship. So it's not so much about what they're getting out of it. It's more about building a broader, bigger community more than anything else. Because here's the truth. The truth of the matter is, whenever Mike tells me, okay, what do you think about this? We want to run, the easy part is the people. That's getting the people will never be an issue. Men, women, children, whatever you're thinking of, that will never be the issue. But creating a space where people can, specifically for people who have been impacted, they understand that anything they say can and will be used against them. So with that understanding, if you don't create an atmosphere where they feel safe, they're gonna just tell you whatever you think you want to hear. Yeah, you're absolutely right, or whatever. So that research will be tainted. It won't be sound research. And so this way, I don't know if all of you guys do research or not, but one thing I would, and I don't know if you can put this in the grant or not, but everybody needs a bridge. I promise you, that bridge is like so huge. So these are the things that will help you get and abstract the things that you're looking for, honestly.
I have a question for, I think, both of you, related to if you're working on like interventions, and like to what extent are you also dealing with at organizational levels, like either prison organization or community organizations? And does that lead to sort of conflicts with, no, you can't do this, no, we don't have the resources for this, and how do you navigate those challenges in looking at interventions that need to be realistic to get implemented, and at the same time may require resources that you kind of hear no for that?
Aaron, do you have thoughts on that?
No, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, that's very real. That is very real. Especially working with a system like corrections, where there's a lot of constraints and few resources. Like I can give you one example. Is one of the major themes that has derived from our work is that when you're talking about people who've been impacted by the criminal legal system, who is delivering the service or intervention is of paramount importance. This has to be a person who's trusted, who has credibility, and a lot of times that amounts to being a peer, someone who's had that same lived experience, who knows what you've been going through. And with corrections, for example, they have what they call a fraternization policy that explicitly prohibits or limits the opportunities for people who've been incarcerated to come back into prison and provide services. So that's a specific example of something where that's very, very real. And sometimes you find you have to adjust things, and you have to, they're limited in a way, and you have to decide at some point, is this still a value, or does this become not of value if we can't, do it this particular way? Another one of the overarching principles that I've taken from this work is to find ways to provide services that really, the services really come from the empowerment of the impacted community themselves, and such that they're not always dependent on an organization to say yes or no, or to give their blessing to it. So that a lot of the work we're doing has some of that. Either it's entirely about that, or there's some element about building capacity in the community to provide the service that needs to be provided. And of course, that creates its own challenges where, like, if there's not already a model by which those services are compensated, then, how do we work that out? So it's kind of I see those as like kind of two ways to get there, and they have their own challenges. But yeah, multiple different ways to look at that.
It's all pretty interesting to me.
Looks like Delilah has a question.
All right now.
What an amazing presentation. And I know incarcerated people who've been incarcerated. I've had family members who are incarcerated. I know people in the community who've been incarcerated. And what I will say is that I am just really blown away by your team's ability to embrace that community without with the stigma that might come with that. And that's what my question kind of involves, of like, I think you've talked about some of the outcomes and benefits that you may not have seen coming. Like, I appreciate the ability for the team to show up as the community, and the research team to show up in an authentic way, which I think is what really fosters this relationship. But how is this project in itself breaking down some of those stigma barriers, I think, for the university? Because I think that people automatically, some people may have preconceived ideas about people who've been incarcerated, and then they might so I want to, like, has that been an impact, and has that had a positive impact on that?
I was absolutely one of those people. I didn't know anybody, anybody close to me anyway, who had been incarcerated. And so what I knew about, Aaron's from the inner city of Milwaukee. He can talk about his upbringing, but like, as I grew up in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, like Aaron mentioned, I didn't know any. I knew very few Black people, and none like really that closely. I knew nothing about, people who have had the kind of experiences Aaron has had growing up. And so, I was subject to the same misrepresentations that many of us are, through the media and through the news, so I had all those biases and prejudices in my mind. And there's just no substitute for getting to know someone and realizing we're all more the same than we are different. Like I mentioned, we want the same things in life. And yeah, it's been extremely impactful to me personally. And I kind of joke with Aaron when I got to meet him, and knowing, and I've heard him say about himself, like, the statistical probability of him being where he is very, very low. And for him to have gone through what he went through as a child, adolescent, and an adult, and be the thoughtful and caring and compassionate person that he is, I'm like, this is a superhuman level of resilience. And I used to say, I'm like, this guy is like a unicorn. There can't be anybody else like him. I just happened to meet the one guy who could possibly, have gone through a path like this and be the person that they are. And come to find out, he's not. He's remarkable and unique in very many ways, I can tell you. But like, he's introduced me to, a multitude of people who who have this capacity to grow and change. And I don't know that there's any substitute for seeing that firsthand. I mean, I tell anybody who I get in a conversation with about this, like how impactful it's been to me, but I don't know that there's any substitute for that.
Do you think that that experience has like other colleagues who you work with have had similar type of experience to as you, as maybe not as in depth as the PI, but just thinking about widespread or more widespread change in attitudes around that?
I would love to help facilitate that. You know, I to the extent that I can in my lab, yeah, and through our colleagues, I'm sure that some of our colleagues that Aaron has met and know that have gotten involved in this have had this experience to a degree. You know, the students who I get to bring in the lab as, you know, grad students and staff or undergraduate students, I think, you know, have that experience to some degree. But you know, this is something that Aaron and I talk more about, is like, how do we build this relationship more broadly between the university and community, in a way that there's bi-directional exchange of knowledge. That's one thing I've been really struck by, just as kind of an aside, is like how hungry the folks you work with, like, yeah, they want to share, but they want to learn from us too. Like, well, how do you do something like that? Like, how is your organization successful in the way that it is? Because they want to apply some of those same you know, lessons and successes in their own organizations. So there is, like Aaron was alluding to, I think, just huge untapped sources of exchange and relationship with community that we're not currently taking advantage of. And in specific, even thinking just like the medical school, God, I mean, we talk about health disparities. I mean, I think, speaking for Aaron, he can comment on this, but we would love to be part of a broader effort to, you know, really focus on, you know, more comprehensively. I mean, because when we started this, we had some pretty specific product ideas in mind. And one of the first things Aaron says, like, you do not know the height, the length, the width of this thing. This is bigger than you can possibly imagine. And I'm still trying to grapple with that and understand, you know, the size and the weight of some of these issues. But I mean, there's plenty to do here. I mean, it could expand in all sorts of ways. Aaron, you have thoughts on that, I know.
Yes. I mean, like, you know, each person, I don't know all of you guys' department, but I think, you know, for whatever department you're in, man, like, we got people. We got nothing but people for you. And again, we won't run out of people. So that'll never be an issue. Just a matter of what do you want to accomplish, and being open on the flip side to hear what they want to accomplish. One thing that happened, this was just real funny, but when we first did our first ever anything, Mike, they gave us a list of questions that wanted to be asked, and you know, I know why, because you know, you're trying to extract that information for research. And I just shared with him, like, you know, one, let me break it down the way I want to break it down, so it won't take away from your question at all, but we will abstract more information than you ever could imagine. It won't be just limited to what you were just asking. And so from that point on, I love the facilitation piece of it, because I know the questions that most people won't ask or really want to know. And so really just our building this relationship, man, I can't explain to you, like, and to the point that Mike made, once you see it, like, it's a game changer. It changes everything. Hearing it, you know, in the head, and you know, that sounds good, and but actually seeing it, because like when we go to like really talking and then really like sharing, you all the academic people, all you see is pens moving. That's all you see. They just grabbing everything. When you got the recorder recording, so it's truly a blessing. It is. I have to say that.
We're at the end of our time. I just want to say very deep thank you. This truly is what the Wisconsin idea, well, we should all be about. So and it's definitely in the D&I science world. Mike and Aaron, I'm going to give you the last thoughts.
Yeah, it's been a career changing and life changing experience for me, and I can't say enough about it.
And I would have to echo that. It's been a life changing and changing experience, and my hope is that we can look at this on a broader scale. We can even continue to keep talking about this, but I think this can become a movement. So I just hope that we all, wherever you feel we can fit in, let's make it happen.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you guys again.
All right.